Hey everybody, how you doing? Happy Thursday. Little tough to sit in the shop tonight because it is a beautiful night. And in this part of the world, in Wisconsin, one of the things we know is kind of just around the corner. So um, that's okay. We're going to do an hour of woodworking Q&A, starting with some of you did great. You jumped on here um, ahead of time and got your questions posted, so that's handy. Um, Here we go. Ready? I know you're ready. Ken says, we have a table we bought several years ago. It has a Formica top over high density particle board. Appears to have hardwood banding all around. How do I determine the kind of finish on the banding now and how to remove it to restain and finish? I think the top only needs a treatment, not the legs, which are solid wood. So a finishing, a how to know what you have trick that was taught to me a bunch of years ago, and has worked for me. It's pretty interesting. So you start with, we're going to do this by solvents. So the first solvent you start with is denatured alcohol, and put a little bit on a cotton swab, or in this case, you're looking to take all the finish off. So if you do it with the corner of a rag, that's fine. And with the denatured alcohol, wipe the surface. If that dissolves the finish, it's in all likelihood it's shellac, because denatured alcohol is a solvent for shellac. If the denatured alcohol doesn't touch it, your next step in aggressiveness of solvent is lacquer thinner. Same deal. Put a little on the corner of a rag, wipe the finish. If the lacquer thinner removes it, melts it, then you have lacquer. And then the last test is no test. If denatured alcohol didn't remove it and lacquer thinner didn't remove it, it's probably a polyurethane or a varnish. And in, so in the world of getting the old finish off, um, I don't know that it really matters too much. I mean, the test is interesting to do, but you're probably going to get most of that finish off by sanding. So let me go back and hit the question again here and see if I'm missing anything. Yeah, so I think um, the benefit to doing the finish test is more like in the world of I'm working with an antique and I'm not going to refinish the whole thing, but I want to apply a finish that matches what's already there. So that's where that test will help you. In your case, I'd probably be sanding in order to get the old finish off and get it down to bare wood for your restaining and retop coating step. Next question. I have a hickory kitchen to build. Never worked with hickory. Other than dulling tools quickly, I've read it's tough to glue. Any suggestions for working with hickory? Um, it was funny. I got through lots of years of woodworking, like decades, before I ever worked with hickory. And I did a hickory kitchen table for myself probably 3 years ago. Holy buckets, was it beautiful. Really nice contrast in the wood, light wood, dark wood. It's really, really beautiful. So it's a very hard wood. It's a hardwood scientifically, but it's also a very hard wood. It's also prone to, in the machining process, chipping. So make sure that your tools are really, really sharp. And it can dull tools quickly. So again, just keep sharp tools in front of the hickory. I didn't make any special accommodation when I was gluing it, so maybe do a little more research on that. Um, this was a while ago, but I don't remember um, wiping the glue joints down with solvent before I put stuff together. I'm pretty confident I just used yellow glue and edge glued the tabletop, and I used yellow glue to put the tenons into the mortises, and that was it. So I don't think I had to do any. I don't think you need to do special accommodations for hickory. If anybody who's watching has a different feel on that, you are welcome to comment. I have a table I installed an inlay in after I put finish on the inlay, turned close to the same color as the oak. The inlay is maple. What can I do, or should I do, if anything? So it sounds like the finish you used maybe had a lot of amber to it. Varnishes, solvent-based varnishes often have that. And then they can really turn the substrate a dark, a honey or amber kind of a color. So if you don't like it being toned that dark, it would involve sanding all the finish off to get that contrast again. And then to prevent it from happening again, a base coat it with something like a blonde shellac, which is very light, just like it sounds, blonde, would seal everything so that then when you come back with your top coat, you're not going to get that uber brown, amber, honey, dark color on the maple inlay or on the oak table either. I'd like to make a drop leaf table with a rule joint. I need to purchase the bits to the desired thickness of the top, impact the size of bit I should purchase. I think so. It's a while. I did a drop leaf. I did a handkerchief table that had a drop leaf on it, and I think what you should do when you're shopping for the bits is just look at the specs for the bits. So, for instance, when you get rail and style cutters, it'll say with the cutters, these bits work for door parts of a thickness 3/4 to 7/8 or whatever that span is. Lock miter bits are the same way. Drawer lock bits are the same way. So on this rule joint, I'm going to say 3/4 is probably very, very, very prevalent. If you're working with a thicker stock than that, look for a bit whose range covers that thicker material. Any opinions on Mirka sanders and the Air ET sandpaper? Jim is asking. I'm not sure. I'm blanking out on the Air ET sandpaper. I don't know what that is. I love the Mirka sanders. I've got 2 of them. Let me show you folks. We got to do a little bit of work to get to them, but you'll get to see my canoe while we're going in that direction. Caught a cord here. I didn't mean to catch. There we go. There's a cedar strip canoe I'm working on. But everything is on casters because you know how I am about moving stuff around. So with the Mirkas, I really like low profile, easy to manipulate, and they remind me of back in the day, I ran a commercial cabinet shop, and everything we did was pneumatic. So we call those sanders DAs, dual action. Basically, there's just a pneumatic random orbit. So with these Mirkas, what I really, really like is they're built very much like a DA, so they fit into my hand well. They don't have a lot of vibration. They cut fast. Dust collection on them is really, really good. So on something like, well, a canoe will be a good example where you're really free form moving over the side. When I've sanded guitar bodies where there's a lot of contours, then you're really manipulating the sander around. They've been really, really good for that. So yeah, I've got 2 of the random orbits there on the bench, 2 5-inch machines. And I'm buying, I should have looked when I was over there. The sandpaper I'm getting primarily for them is Mirka's, not the net one, the one that's got lots and lots and lots of holes in it. It's probably not officially called, the one with lots of holes, but. Do you ever use computer software to increase efficiency of your cutlass diagrams? Yep, I do. So Bridgewood, I'm going to put this in the notes because I know how these things go. It's called optimization software. So I'm writing it in the comments for you guys. Optimization software. Bridgewood is the software company. Cut list, plus is what I use. So the deal with this is if I'm doing anything that involves a lot of sheets of plywood or melamine or MDF, you create your cut list. And so I'll do a SketchUp drawing, I'll create a cut list, then I'll put that cut list into Cut List Plus, and it'll optimize those parts. So in the case of melamine, it doesn't matter which way the grain is going. So you can tell it that, and it'll rotate those parts. When you're working with plywood, you probably want the grain running in the long direction. So you can tell it that, and it won't rotate those parts. But it lays them all out on a sheet and nests them together to make sure you're getting as many parts as you can out of a sheet. It's really, I use it all the time, even on smaller projects, just to see, well, in fact, that sanding station we were just looking at, I drew that in SketchUp. I put those parts into the optimizer just to see the best way to get them out of a 4x8. I have some old rosewood guitar fretboard blanks for a Fender guitar. Best glue to attach to the Strat neck. Well, so yellow glue will do it. Oily woods, so this kind of throws circles back to our hickory question. Oily woods like rosewood do need to be wiped down before you glue them. So the guitars I've made, you can just kind of see the bottom of one hanging there in the office. On guitars I've made, I've just used yellow glue to glue the fretboard down. I don't know if a traditional luthier, an instrument maker, would use hide glue in that application. I know on guitar bodies, hide glue gets used more widely. But wipe it down with acetone, wipe the rosewood down with acetone to get the oil off of it. Let the acetone dry, and then go back and glue that to the neck. I'm a wooden model shipbuilder and wondered if the tips here would work at this smaller scale. Tips. I mean, you mean like woodworking tips in general? I don't know. You watch and then you tell us if I'm helping you out or not. Michael says, when did you start your YouTube channel and how long, if you remember, did it take before you could make a living at it? Thanks for answering my question. You're assuming I'm making a living. So my situation is very, very different from a lot of content creators like Matt Cremona, Mark Spagnola, Jay Bates, John Malecki. In my case, there's a mothership, and that company owns, I think, 15 different brands: woodworking, photography, personal defense, yoga. So there's a George, or there's content in each of those brands that's being produced. So in my case, I'm contract labor to that company who created the YouTube channel, who sets up these events, who, all of that, like administrative stuff. When you're getting emails from Woodworkers Guild of America, those are coming from the mothership, I'm not sitting here typing those out. So I do know from talking to my friends like Jay Bates, John Malecki, and Spagnolo, that as a general rule, it takes people about 2 years in order to get to a point where they can start to effectively monetize stuff like their YouTube channel. And those numbers are a little bit old, meaning that becoming a content creator 6 years ago is different than what it's going to be becoming one today, because the space has gotten really crowded. Lots and lots of people are running an iPhone and shooting videos and throwing videos up there. So it could be that that time frame might be even longer today than it used to be, because there are so many people fighting for the space. But as a general rule of thumb, the number has been a couple years. This Woodworkers Guild first put videos on YouTube in about 2008, 2007, 2008. Dennis says, do you have heavy duty bar or sash clamps? And if so, what are your likes or dislikes? So I've got, let me just run. You guys stay there. I'm coming right back. I didn't forget you. The heaviest duty clamp that I own is this. This is a Jorgensen I-beam clamp. So the good news is it'll really draw stuff together. Honestly, it's not that common that I need to work that hard to draw stuff together. So I've got a rack over there full of parallel jaw clamps, and that's what I use 98% of the time. So dislikes, they're very heavy. Unlike the parallel jaw clamps, the jaws on these are pretty good at staying parallel, but they're not quite as cleanly parallel or perpendicular to the beam as a parallel jaw clamp would be. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's just for most of what I do, it's more clamp than I need to work with. And if I get in a scenario like mortises on a table would be a great example, where I need to manipulate the clamp this way in order to close mortises, that's where the weight of something like this can, it just becomes a struggle. And then, of course, it doesn't have clamp pads on it like the parallel jaws do. So you'd have to add clamp pads to make sure you're not going to mar your wood. Lewis says, saw your clamps. I never did hear the total number. So the total number in that photo, so if you're not familiar with this, a bunch of months ago, we did a contest, which was to guess how many clamps were in a picture. And it's my big clamp rack. It's going to be kind of behind the bandsaw for you. See if I can sneak you in the right direction. If you've not seen it, cord, am I making you seasick? It's that clamp rack. So the answer to that, which was how many are in the picture, was 313. But there are clamps on this bench, there are clamps on that wall, there are clamps on that wall. Unless you think I am, I don't know, a clamp hoarder, when I have a cabinet making class in here with 10 people in it, you'd be surprised at how frequently every clamp in this place ends up getting used, and those racks are completely bare. Why does my cast iron look worse after waxing than before it's waxed? Like worse, how? I think wax turns it, I don't know. If it was uber shiny as a brand new tool, maybe it dulls it a little bit, but I'm not sure. I routinely, I don't put wax on, but I put Glide Coat lubricant on my cast iron. I'm pointing to my table saw. I put Glide Coat on all the time, and I wouldn't say, yeah, I don't know. If you can, if you're still on, define for us what you mean by worse. A good place to purchase woodworking tools for guitar making. So I'm going to put this in the comments too. Guitar making, ... Stewart, got to learn to spell. McDonald. And shoot, I have to remember the other one. It's I think it's Luthier's Supply. But don't hold me to that. I'm pretty sure that's right. So I wrote that, I put that into the comments. Benjamin on YouTube, you know of a company that makes custom handsaws? You know, I don't know if they do custom. I'm going to do a little Googling here. There's a company in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I'm blanking on their name. Oh yeah, there it is. Bad Axe Tool Works. I'm going to, guess what? I'm going to put this in the comments. Handsaw company. And I just copied their link. I'm going to paste it. So yeah, Bad Axe Tool Works is here in Wisconsin, so you can check them. Would you have any interest in doing a WB spray finishing class? WB. If I knew what WB meant, maybe. WB. Why am I drawing such a blank? What am I missing, Tina? What's WB? I don't know. Any plans on the website for an outdoor rocking chair? Nope. Sorry. No. Go fish. There it is. Luthier's Mercantile, not Luthier's Supply. Thank you, John. Oh, and there's a comment here that Rob Kosman also makes saws. That's a good point. Oh, so back to this. Interest in doing a water-based spray finishing class? Yeah, maybe. It's hard. The thing we've struggled with finishing and cameras in the room is overspray. So as a general rule, when I teach finishing on video, I have water, just nothing but water in the gun, because we find that, if we get a little bit of moisture in the air, we can wipe the cameras down and they're okay. If we get finish overspray in the air, and with an HVLP, it's typically not bad, but that's really bad on the equipment. So I don't know. I'd have to stew on that if we could pull that off. The logistics part. Plans for a router cabinet. So I have to think. I'm looking at my router cabinet. I don't think that we have ever run that. What a great question. And I'm not sure why we didn't. A router table would be a great. What I did is I got a woodpecker's top and fence, and then I built the cabinet below it. And what I like about that is I want that router tabletop to be dead flat. So I'm relying on their production capabilities. It's phenolic to get that thing dead flat. It's got T-tracks in it for the fence. And then I put my woodworking into making a base where I can store my router bits, store my accessories, all of that kind of stuff. So that's a great point. That'd be a great video to do. Bob says, I have a 24 by 24 inch, 3.5 inch panel to cut 30 degrees on two sides. 3.5 inches thick. So, man, you're gonna have to buy a saw just to do this work, because it's on most table saws, when the blade is perpendicular to the table, it's out 3 inches. So to get enough depth of cut to go through 3.5 at 30 degrees, you're going to need a blade that'll project, I don't know, 3 3/4 vertically to get 3.5 at an angle. A table saw is not going to do it. And I'm trying to think, even the bigger Festool track saw will cut 2-inch stock. So there are circ saws in the marketplace in the post and beam industry that, oddly enough, people use to cut posts and beams. They'll cut a 6x6, they'll cut an 8x8. So a saw like that on a track would be a way to do it. 24 by 24, and it's only two sides, so it's not huge. It'd be a good sharp handsaw, might be the way to go. Mark it out carefully, and then so it'd be interesting. You could mark it out carefully. You could possibly use a table saw to make a 30-degree cut from the top and a 30-degree cut from the bottom. That would provide a curve that you could then follow with a handsaw. That could be interesting. And it would give you, because you had that curve to follow, it'd give you kind of a track to run the handsaw in, make it a little easier to do. That's probably what I would do, is I'd start on the table saw and get as far as I can, and then use those curves like a track and finish it with a handsaw. Jason says, suggestions on which videos for someone with basic skills and basic tools to do simple starter projects like tables, maybe make a shelving unit. Also interested in working my way up to a nice panel wall. Oh, like a raised panel, like a wainscoted raised panel kind of a wall. That'd be cool. So the cabinet making video, introduction to cabinet making, introduction to furniture making, those are really geared to be like, not, this is a hammer, this is a nail, but to talk about safety on the tools. They're actually video forms of hands-on classes I teach here. So they're really designed to be, we're making a cabinet, but what we're really doing is teaching you woodworking. So when we get to the dado head, we talk about this as a stacked dado head. Here's how to put it on the saw. So it's all the background stuff that you need at every step in order to do that step. We're not just walking up to the saw and saying the dado is set up, so let's go. So that intro to furniture making, intro to cabinet making would be a great starter point. And those would both give you a really good set of base skills. And then Michael says, buying dimensional lumber for projects such as 2x4s, usually plane them first. So yeah, well, I mean, and it depends. One thing is buy it and allow some time to get it in your shop for a while before you're going to use it. So stuff like 2x4s, 2x8s, 1x6s from a home center, they're dried as construction material, not the same way that we dry wood we're going to use for like kiln dried oak, kiln dried maple, walnut. So part of the difference is that the moisture level they're driving it to might have only been 10 or 12% instead of 6 or 8%. So it's the 2x4s, the dimensional lumber is more reactive. So you may have experienced this. You buy it, you get it to your shop, you start cutting it, and it's doing all sorts of weird, snaky stuff. So part of a way to overcome that is get it in your shop, let it acclimate to that instead of the lumberyard, and that'll help it stabilize. And then if you want to use that stuff like a furniture would, then yeah, I would. I'd face joint it, I'd plane it, I would start with it as a 2x4, but dimensionally plan on machining it down to 1.25 by 3 maybe, so that you have nice flat surfaces to work with. I mean, if nothing else, as a 2x4, those faces, like if you had to glue two faces together and you just took a 2x4 and glued two faces, they're probably not very flat. So you're not going to get a good glue joint. Where if you face joint them, plane them, you get a much better bond between them. Good fire safe gloves for wood burning, and how do you store hot tips when changing them out? I don't know. I've never done pyrography, so I have no tips for your tips. Sorry about that. Scott says the audio is getting choppy. My battery is still on full. These aren't battery units, the receiver and the sender. There you plug them in and recharge them, which they were plugged in all day. And I'm looking at the little green light, which is full. But thanks for the warning. Benjamin says, you like the Festool, Domino, or mortiser? If Domino, do you suggest the 500 or 700? I still own a bench top mortiser, and I own a Domino. And I've often said I may never cut, except for educational purposes, in my own woodworking, I may never cut another mortise. I use the Domino all the time. So the difference between the two models is the size of Domino that they allow you to install. So what I would look at, if you want to kind of treat the Domino like an average everyday biscuit joiner, you're working with a lot of 3/4 inch stock, the smaller unit, the 500, is going to be fine. If you think you're going to lean toward working with thicker material, then the bigger unit is better. So for instance, if you're going to do stuff with live edge slabs, then going to the bigger model is going to be better. And the other thing is the joiners, I'm pretty sure, so check this, but I'm pretty sure that the joiners that you can use, you cut the slots with the Domino, and then there's knockdown assembly joiners you can put into a tabletop or something like that. I believe those only work with the big unit, with the 700. So if you have any interest in using those, that would also default you to the 700. Edward says, did you say your router table and fence were woodpecker? Yep, they are, both. Your thoughts on SawStop table saws for the woodworking hobbyist? They are absolutely wonderful. When people ask, and SawStop doesn't owe me a dime and I don't owe them a dime. I've had my SawStop since 2007. And when people ask me what table saw should they buy, I always just say SawStop. Save your pennies, buy a SawStop. And there's lots of good, from a functionality perspective, there are a lot of good table saws in the marketplace when it comes to cutting wood. I love the protection that comes with a SawStop. So my typical phrasing on that is SawStop makes a really excellent saw that also has the brake technology on it. So I have zero complaints with the saw. When I first got it, especially with classes in here, I was a little concerned about the changeover. If you change from a 10-inch blade to an 8-inch dado, you also change the brake. And I thought there'd be a big time lag with those changes going back and forth. But even with people who've never done it before, once you do it once, it's a very smooth, very fast change. So yeah, I like them a lot. Advantages of NordFab ductwork versus PVC for a home shop. I'm not much of a dust collection guy. If Paul, who writes a lot for GOA, is watching, he can put a note in the comments. He really knows a lot about dust collection, but it would be it's not in my strong point, and it would be unfair for me to answer the question. Oh, here's a great tip on that big panel. If you own a bandsaw, so doing that 30-degree bevel on a 3.5-inch thick bandsaw or 3.5-inch thick panel, a bandsaw would be a great way to do that. I didn't even think of that. That's a great idea. Claudette says, I'm considering buying an Incra router table system because the fence is so great. I quickly outgrew my tabletop Bosch table. What other brands would you recommend? I'm new to woodworking, but love it. Long time since I looked at router tables, like from a tool test perspective. I've used Craig's. So in the world of tables I've used and I had complaints with, Craig, the woodpeckers I have now, Jessam, Rockler has some really nice router tables. So it's going to depend a lot on budget. Trying to think if anybody else's. I've got SawStop's benchtop router table. When we have a class in here and we have 2 tables running, we use that one. I'm very happy with that. So a couple options for you there. Bob says, how is the Jet model number? Bandsaw, I have a chance to buy a used one. Yeah, I'm just not, it's not a saw I have used. So unfortunately, I have no advice for you. I had a Jet 14-inch bandsaw in here for a long time. I started with a Delta and I swapped it out for the Jet only because the Delta had appeared in like 11 billion videos. So I just wanted a different model for the next billion videos. And then eventually I swapped the Jet out for a Laguna for the exact same reason. So the Jet 14 was fine, but I don't know anything about the 18. Scott says, I have a job site saw. I can't get everything parallel and perpendicular. Suggestions or call the manufacturer. Yeah, I would, it's hard to know where things are going kerflooey. On our table saw techniques video, which I think you can get online on the site, the first part of that is all about saw setup. And it's not done, it's done on a contractor saw primarily, I think. We shot that video a long time ago. It's still in my old shop. But I think we shot most of that on a contractor saw. but at least that would walk you through the setup stuff if you want to look at that. But if you've got specific stuff you're running into, it could be more of a rifle shot to call the manufacturer and itemize, here's what I'm up against, and see what they have to say. Making a vanity and a top out of solid cherry. The top will have a vessel sink in it. So be in a powder room, not see daily use. What finish would you use? Occasional water splash. It's hard to beat polyurethane for that stuff. I have got, trying to think a second. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's, the brand I use the most is Aqua Coat, and Aquathane is the product I've been using now, and I'm not sure what its water resistance is. So it's very easy to work with. It handles really well, and it's water-based, which is convenient. But I would just check with Aqua Coat and ask them that same question. If it gives you the water, you know, can half a cup of water sit on there for a couple hours and not destroy the finish? Otherwise, you know, a polyurethane with some exterior capability would certainly do it. So Donovan says the knockdown fasteners work for the 5 and the 700. So there you go. That helps that. I mean, in that it doesn't paint you into a corner that you got to have the 700. I have a curvy 7x5x30 table leg base. 7x5x30 table leg base made up of 5 different boards laminated together that I have to duplicate. Should I cut each board separately with a template and a flush trim bit and then glue them up, or laminate them all together, then cut it all at once on my 14-inch bandsaw with a riser? If you want to, if I were pre-cutting them, I would also put into that whole template jigging process registration holes, so that when you glue them together, you know, when they're slippery with glue, the problem's going to be they're going to slide around, and those nice curves you just cut and trimmed aren't going to line up. So if I were doing that approach, I would add to that a registration pin that's in the exact same spot, obviously, on every piece, probably 2 of them. So when you put them together, it locks those edges into alignment. Alternatively, then, you know, the problem, like, it's going to depend on what kind of curve. So if it's curvy and it's one big convex curve, that's pretty easy to sand. Outside curves are easy to sand. If it's got a lot of curves to it, if it's more S-shaped, then getting in all those nooks and crannies with, I don't know what, on such a thick piece is going to be a struggle. So if it's one big outside curve, I'd glue them together first, and I'd cut them on the bandsaw. If it's a curve with a lot of detail to it, that would be a pain to sand after it's cut. Then I would do your first method of template, flush trim, but put them together in a way that they register, so you don't lose it. Terry says, when I run stock through my jointer, it comes out with a slight angle or gets worse, which he's succeeding to pass. What am I doing wrong with my technique or machine? Comes out with a slight angle. So angle, you got to help me, Terry, with angle end to end or side to side? Because that's a big difference. I mean, angle side to side. So if I joint, this really pretty piece of quarter sawn fir, that was a fun project. If I joint this and this ends up angled, then your fence is out of square. If I'm jointing this way and it's angling, maybe your hand pressure isn't uniform. You're leaning on one end too much, and you're not leaning on the other end, and that can make that happen. And at the end of the day with a jointer, don't lean on it at all. It's just hand pressure is all you need. The weight of your hands is all you need to get that over the cutter head. Lisa says, I'm a beginner and plan on purchasing my first plane. Any tips on which one? Boeing 707. Yeah, I'm such the wrong guy to ask. I am such not a hand tool guy. So unfortunately, I can't help you. Matt Cremona is a big hand tool guy. Mark Spagnolo, Wood Whisperer, is a bigger hand tool guy than me. If you send that question their way, you'd get a better answer. Sandra says, if you're in the market for a new circ saw, would you do 6.5 or go with 7.25, and why? 7.25 because I said so, and that's all the more reason you need. No, I would do, so we'll 6.5. So half of that is 3.25. I want to be able to cut, or I want to be able to cut a 4x4 in 2 passes. And I know I can do that with a 7.25. I've never used a 6.5-inch circ saw, so I don't know if I can do it with that. So that would be my only thing. I mean, the 6.5 is probably easier to handle because it's a smaller saw. And when it comes to like freehand and a straight line on plywood, easy to handle is a good thing. But if you're getting into, if you want to be able to cut thicker stuff, that bigger blade is going to help you and probably carry with it a bigger saw. So if you're primarily going to be doing 3/4-inch material, 1.5-inch studs, that kind of stuff, then the 6.5 would probably be fine. I don't see any power cords to your equipment. Did you run power up from the floor, such as in the slab? Yeah, no, nothing. This building was this building before I got here, and then had to get wired. It was actually a retail store. It was a fireworks store. And before that, it was the county library. How's that for weird? So it got wired. So I have a lot of drops. And then same, my table saw is right here, 220 drop. Joiner has a 220 drop. So I'm big on drops coming from the ceiling. Gary says, thanks for doing these. Hope all is well. Yeah, I'm doing great. And thanks for watching. If we didn't have 380 people watching here and 275 on the YouTube, we would have no compelling reason to do this. So Mike says, intro to furniture making videos. I haven't seen them. Yeah, it should be, if you just search, so like on this screen where you're watching the video on GOA.com, or no, you're watching on YouTube. So yeah, just go to WWGOA.com and search intro to furniture making, and it should pop up. And I think that one, I can't remember like at what level of being a subscriber you get this, and this. Generally, like the stuff is available a la carte also. So the follow up to that of do you charge for that? I don't know, because that's set up on the website, and some videos are free, some are not. Any recommendations on a good wood to use for outdoor furniture besides cedar? Having trouble finding cedar in Utah. Hopefully something not super expensive. Well, traditionally, it would be cedar, white oak. I'm naming a bunch of expensive woods. Mahogany, teak, ipe are all naturally water resistant. Jarrah is an Australian wood that's really beautiful and naturally water resistant. What about, I don't know that it's much less expensive, Gary, but what about like Trex, decking, manufactured decking for outdoor furniture? That might be an option for you. Gerald says, saludos from Panama. Hola. Learned a lot from your videos, specifically kitchen cabinet and drawer building. Bought a 2-inch drawer lock bit to make drawer fronts with overlap. My question is, how can I line up a stack of drawer fronts after installation as those fixed fronts cannot be adjusted? Yeah, be adjusted. That's a sticky mess. You got to be really, really, really careful. I did a dresser not that long ago with inset drawer fronts and 3/32 gap per side. And the bottom line is just building the drawer, installing the drawer. They run mechanical slides, installing the slides. Everything just has to be dialed in because when they're in, they're in. So I don't know, I guess for you, it depends on if they're kitchen drawers, they're probably on slides. So then you could get some adjustment out of the slides to move them up and down on each side. Regarding router tables, I don't know if you can get a SawStop with a router mount, but I bought my Grizzly with one. My router table is thus a flat piece of cast iron, and it uses the table saw fence. I built an auxiliary fence that clamps onto the fence and add a dust collection port and movable faces to bury the router bit. And it's a great setup. So, and that's a great way to go because you're saving real estate and you're optimizing the flat surface. I'm again pointing to my table saw. You're optimizing the flat surface you already have with your table saw to get a router table out of it. For me, it doesn't work because of classes. So I can't tie up the table saw as a router table because when we get going, we're probably running the router table, both of them, and the table saw and the joiner and who knows what else. But it's a great way to go. Oh, Tracy says tempered glass on top of the cherry vanity. And my only concern with that would be if moisture gets between the glass and the wood, you're in trouble. But if you could keep that from happening, that'd be a cool way to go. Kevin says, in your videos, you regularly make a point of saying the tool is unplugged before making adjustments. Is that something you say to yourself verbally when doing your own woodworking, like a ritual? I do talk to myself a lot, but for me, this is, depending on when we want to count my starting point, I was given a lathe when I was 11. So I've been doing this stuff for 48 years. It's so rote with me to unplug the tool, make the adjustment, plug it in, unplug, make the adjustment, plug it in, that at this point, I don't have to remind myself to do that anymore. But if a little mantra like that to remind you, it's not a bad way to go, just to make sure that you're being as safe as you can. It's, really with the videos, I'm crazy hard on safety stuff. Hard on it meaning I think I push that maybe more than some other people do. So it's just when I'm doing it in a video, really, it's to remind you folks that sometimes you can see the plug sitting there on the saw because we make a point of that. Sometimes you can't. So me saying it's unplugged is a way to make sure you know to unplug your stuff. Dennis asks, according to your knowledge, thank you for assuming I have knowledge, which type of wood are grown in sustainable forests and which are not? I don't know. Google would know. I don't, yeah, you'd have to do some poking around to see. And I don't think you could pick which wood are grown in sustainable. I'm not sure you could even pick a species. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'm guessing you couldn't say all red oak is necessarily in a sustainable forest because it probably depends on where it came from. So I think you'd have to Google it, but then you'd also have to check suppliers in your area about where they're getting their stuff from. Okay, so we've kicked back in. Terry says the wood is angled side to side. So yeah, then that's on the jointer question. So then I would double check the fence because then if you're against the fence and the fence is kerfluiated, then when it leans against the fence, it's going to make a little bit of an angle to start with. And then that angle is going to get wider on the next pass and wider on the next pass, and you'll have a lovely bevel when you're done. Tim says, want to build an outfeed and assembly table. Would you recommend MFT type holes or T-tracks? if MFT 20 millimeter or 3/4. So I've got T-tracks in this table, which sometimes becomes an outfeed table for my table saw if I'm cutting a lot of stuff. The T-tracks here have served me very well. I've got banks of 3/4 inch holes, which then my primary application for those are these Bessie clamps. They've got a 3/4 lug on them. So they'll go into the hole and then they lock up so that if I have down pressure from this is holding it in place. Then I've also got some armor products that go into those same holes. So there's another hole down that'll socket into that hole. And then that's a self-adjusting toggle clamp on there. So I think this is a thing where it's like, my answer to this is T-track, and a couple of 3/4 inch holes works great for me. I've also got Craig's, can you see it? That's Craig's little keyhole that receives their hold down, is in the middle of the bench. Somebody else might say, oh my gosh, the MFT tables are amazing and you should do it that way. I don't own an MFT table, so I don't know. I maybe don't know what I'm missing. But in this table, the T-track and the stops and stuff that slip into it, it worked very well for me. After a kickback on my table saw, my heart always thumps when using it. I feel it's more unsafe than a confident approach. Thoughts or suggestions? Yeah, I mean, I agree that, you don't want to be a tentative motorcycle rider. You don't want to be a tentative table saw user. I know things are pretty kerflooey now with classes because a bunch of my stuff got canceled. But it'd be nice if you could go take a class someplace, a woodcraft, a rockler, a woodworking school, and kind of treat it starting from the beginning perspective, and let somebody walk you through, do this, stand here, use this hand position, just to help build that confidence back up. Tips or videos for picture frame and glass door cabinets. So you can do glass doors. There are rail and style cutter sets that are specifically for glass doors. And instead of a groove in the edge of the door, they leave a rabbet, so you can put a piece of glass in there. And then picture frames I typically do with a router bit. I rabbet those out with a router bit on the router table pre-assembly. Videos. So I think we've got an all about doors video, and I think that has a glass door in it. I think the procedure for making a glass door, I think, is included in that. Is the old drill press for decoration or used? So I'm trying to see where it is in your frame. It's way off to the side. I love that thing. So this, I'll give you a little zoom action there. I lost it. There we go. I saw this at a farm auction and I had to have it. I just love the mechanism on it. And all the parts were here. The big old like 20 penny nail in there as a pin was in there when I got it. So I left it because I think that's cool. I had seen other drill presses like this, but missing the chuck or missing the handle. And where am I ever going to find that? Amazon carries a lot of stuff. They don't carry a chuck for a post drill. So when you turn this, the kicker on top is actually advancing this, which moves the whole thing down toward the table. So today, when I have classes with kids in here, coming back, when I have classes in here with kids, one of the projects we sometimes make is a birdhouse, and it's got a 1-inch hole in it. And I'll have them go to that post drill and crank it with a bit in order to punch that 1-inch hole. And they complain a lot, but in a very jovial way about it. It's a very cool tool. Thoughts on setting up shop in a basement? Yeah, it's a long time since I had a basement shop, but getting stuff in and out can be, you got to be creative. Can you get a 4x8 sheet of plywood down the steps and into the basement? Is moisture an issue? If you're in a place where you're running a central air furnace, are you going to be pulling dust into the rest of the house, or what do you have to do to prevent pulling dust and fumes into the rest of the house? So it's not a bad, if that square footage is already there and unused, it's not a bad way to go. But there you might have to do some workarounds. Are you going to be able to run your joiner when you want to work at 11 o'clock at night without the rest of the house yelling at you? So a couple parameters like that. Gary says, what do you think about using a track saw as an affordable alternative to a table saw? I recently moved and don't have room for a table saw. It's there are you can do a lot of work with a track saw, and they've come so far. So track saws, and then that Craig system, the name of which I'm currently forgetting, but it's an MFT type table, full of holes, and makes it easy to get the material on there and do square cuts or angled cuts. So yeah, I think it's incredible how much you can do with nothing but a track saw system. So yeah, if you don't have room for a table saw, a track saw could definitely get you pretty far. Bob says he's got a Steel City granite fence jointer. The fence broke. Any place to buy aftermarket jointer fences? And my brain is reeling. I'm trying to think of a joke about don't take it for granted. But you have a broken fence, you probably wouldn't find it very funny. I don't, but I wonder if, so this could be weird. Could you get one made up by a tombstone company? I mean, they're working with the right product, right? They're working with granite. They've got tools that they use to cut it. Could they? It may not have the flatness. Could be the biggest issue that Steel City put into those. You got to have it. It's got to be a very true piece. Otherwise, it's not going to do you any good on a joiner. But that could be worth exploring to see if somebody like that could fabricate it for you. All right, we're sneaking up. We have about 3 minutos left. Chris says, I live in Houston. Heat and humidity wreaks havoc on my cast iron and sander pads. It's the best wax to use on cast iron. Well, I don't use wax mostly because I'm lazy, but I do seal my cast iron all the time, and you'll get the lazy part in a second. Coming back. I use Glide Coat as my sealer, and it's available on Amazon or woodworking specialty stores. And so the lazy part is I can spray this on, walk away for a couple minutes, let it dry, let it flash off, and then rub it out. So yeah, I've been using this, and I can tell in here. I only run the air conditioner in this place when I absolutely have to, which is typically humidity based, not temperature based. I don't really mind the warmth, but sometimes I'll see. Basically the cast iron is turning kind of a darker gray, and I know the humidity's starting to get to it. So I'll run the air to drive the humidity out, make sure I get them sealed, and then turn the air back off. And this does a great job of protecting them and just helping parts slide more readily across the tool. This might be our last one. Can you explain edge grain, face grain, and end grain? And as luck would have it, there's a board here, so we can. Here's our board with 6 sides, top, bottom, edge, edge, end, end. So face grain is the big surface here, face grain here, face grain here. Edge grain is this edge, and then this edge has a rabbet cut into it, but this is our edge grain. And then end is the end of the board where all of the soda straws, the things that were driving water up the tree come out. End grain, end grain. Okay? All right. Then let me just do this little reminder because you can download a thing. Hang on. Then we're going to let everybody go home. I should have done this earlier. Now I have to click to load these other messages. That's the delay. Okay. So there's a link in the comments. Download 3 free woodworking projects. And there's a link there that you can get them. They're beer themed, which is kind of cool. So don't drink beer while you're making the projects, but when the projects are done, you'll appreciate having them while you drink your beer. All right. 8 bells. That's it for me. And I will see you when we do this again in September. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks to Type On for supporting us.